Hi everyone and welcome to Deep Geek Live. This is the latest in my series of live streams looking at the Winds of Winter and the POV characters, the point of view characters that we have, what might be happening to them in the Winds of Winter. I just wanted to start though with a question from one of my patrons, Diego Godoy, who says, I'm sure you've heard the new update by George R.R. Martin on the Winds of Winter that he posted on his blog. The book will not be done this summer, and he hopes it will be done by next year. Honestly, do you think we will ever get to the Winds of Winter? If the saga is not completed by George R.R. Martin, will this affect its status on the long term compared to Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings? Okay, so if you have missed this news, then this was an update that George R. R. Martin came out with, I think 2 days ago now, and I'll read it. He did a blog post. I will read the relevant bit here, which he's talking about what he's up to, basically. He says, if nothing else, the enforced isolation has helped me write. I am spending long hours every day on the Winds of Winter and making steady progress. I finished a new chapter yesterday, another one 3 days ago, another one the previous week. But no, this does not mean that the book will be finished tomorrow or published next week. It's going to be a huge book, and I still have a long way to go. Please do not give any credence to any of the clickbait websites that like to pass every word of my posts as if they were papal encyclicals to divine hidden meanings. So that's where we're at. George R. R. Martin has basically said it's not happening this year. Don't get your hopes up, but he is working on it. I think that the key takeaway point here is that this is going to be huge. We thought beforehand this was going to be quite a big book, but this kind of explains why it's taking so long. Yes, his writing speed has slowed down, but he is now focusing on this as the main thing that he's doing. He is making progress. It sounds like he's doing a chapter or two every week, which is good, but still, it's a long way off. So my general reflection on this is, yes, obviously I'm disappointed, but I would rather that this be an excellent piece of art in a few years' time than just another good book. I think that if he wants to take extra time to make it better, then that's great. So I'm disappointed, but I am fully supportive. The way Neil Gaiman put it, I think probably said it quite well, was George R. R. Martin is not your bitch. He's not my bitch. He's none of our bitches. He is in not unique, but a very rare position as an artist that he doesn't need the money. He doesn't need the fame. He doesn't need to write for any other reason than creativity's sake and because he wishes to finish the story. And he'll do it the way that he wants to do it. And I'm personally very happy about that. So that's where we're at. It's not necessarily good news, but I think that the good news is that he is writing and he is still focusing on it and he is still producing extra stuff. Googly Woogly, thank you so much for the super chat, saying looking forward to a lazier afternoon with a pint and some good discussion. Let's have some fun. Absolutely, yeah. So I could do with a pint right now. It's very hot in the UK right now, so if I'm coming across as slightly sweaty, and that's why it's a little bit too warm for me. Alicia Kinston, hi there. I just saw you in the chat. I did a pre-record with Alicia, part of my Secrets of Westeros series. We were looking at the Ironbank that came out yesterday. So if you are interested in Alicia's views on that, and why wouldn't you be, because she is excellent, then please do go and check that out. But today we're looking at Davos. So let's, as we try to do, let's just try and make sure that we're in the same place here with him. His story, the first part of his story is quite similar to what it was on the show. You can substitute Edric Storm for Gendry, who's the person that Melisandre wanted to sort of sacrifice and do all manner of things to, and Davos rescued him. But it was him who discovered the threat from the others, got the message from the wall, persuaded Stannis to go north. They go north. he accompanies Stannis as far as Eastwatch, at which point Stannis says, okay, I'm going to need to get to the north on my side here. I need you to go to the Manderleys at White Harbour. Now, the reason why is because the Manderleys are the richest house in the north and one of the most powerful and influential ones. So he wanted to make sure he could get the Manderleys on side. Davos heads off. He has a few little adventures along the way, but he ends up there and gets caught up in what's clearly a lot of intrigue. He gets captured and he's put in prison. His death is faked. We can get into that in a moment. But then he's brought before one Manderley, who basically says, okay, let's cut a deal. If you go and get Rickon Stark, who we've now discovered where he is, on the Isle of Skagos, and you bring him back, then I'm on your side and I will agree to support Stannis. And that's where we leave it. So Davos is effectively sent off, as far as we can tell, on his own. We don't actually see him head off, and we don't know exactly the timing of this. It seems to be a little while before the events that we see at the end of a Dance with the Dragons, or in the very beginning of the Winds of Winter, because Wyman Manderley has made his way all the way up to Winterfell by that point. So there seems to be a bit of a time gap, but Davos is going off to get Rickon, and that is where we kind of leave the story. He is being caught up in the Great Northern Conspiracy, which is hugely complicated, and I don't think we need to go into the detail of it here, but his role is to get Rickon Stark. If the loyalist houses in the north, the Stark loyalist houses in the north, have Rickon Stark, they have a figure that everyone can rally around. They have this a figurehead that they can make the new Lord of Winterfell. Bran has disappeared, but Rickon they have. And Rickon, we have to remember, is still a child at this point. He's only maybe 6 at this point, so he is just a figurehead, but he's a very important one because of his name. Let's have a quick check through. Maura Lee, thank you so much. Your super chat saying, just to show how much I appreciate all the fabulous content and stories on both your channels. Love the Wizard of Oz on the Well Told Tale. You are so loved. Thank you, and also for your gift. That's very kind of you. For those who don't know, I have 2 channels. I have a second channel called The Well Told Tale, which is my audio narration channel where I read the finest science fiction and fantasy stories ever written. At the moment, I'm working my way through The Wizard of Oz. We're 2 parts into that at the moment. So if you're interested in that, do go and have a look for that. Maura, thank you. You know how much I appreciate your support. Stephen Dillon saying, personal question, what is your favorite show change? I assume you mean what's my favorite TV show at the moment? Does it change? Well, yes, it does obviously change all the time. I think that I would. What's my favorite at the moment is a very good question. I mean, I obviously love Westworld. My holy trinity of great TV shows was The Wire, The West Wing, and Game of Thrones. Those for me are absolutely astonishing bits of art. Certainly some of them dropped off a little bit, but as works of art as a whole, they were my personal favorite. I don't think there's anything around at the moment that I would particularly point to and say that's something I am completely blown away by. But yeah, it does, obviously it shifts through time, and I'm really looking forward to a few different things like the Lord of the Rings show when that comes out. I really enjoyed The Witcher. Looking forward to season 2 of The Witcher. Higa Herger, thank you so much, saying Sir Davos Seaworth, Lord of the Rainwood and the Lord of Grammar, one of my top 5 characters. Yeah, he's a fantastic character, isn't he? He's the Lord of the Grammar. He picked up John and his grammar in the show, which it was rather wonderful, I have to say. So let's. I think I'm caught up on the chat there. So let's go to Lawnduck 20 questions from my patrons. As always, I will frame this around questions from my patrons. Lawnduck 20 says, "Hi Robert, my question is, how in Seven Hells is Davos going to convince Rickon to come back with him? He has negotiated on behalf of Stannis before, but that was with adults, not a child. Rickon is already stubborn enough, and he probably still has Osha advising him. So you have to believe she is wary of strangers. Also, what do you think the first meeting between Shaggy Dog and Davos will be like?" Yeah, I think this is the most fascinating question that we've got, is that Davos was concerned when we saw him at the last chapter we have of him, when he suddenly realizes he's going to have to go to Skagos. He's concerned because he's heard the rumors of Skagos, what it's like as a place. But the bigger issue is, yes, he could survive the journey there, but if he does find Rickon, how will he persuade him to come back? We've not seen Rickon since the Clash of Kings, since Book 2. He and Osha just went off, and they didn't actually say where they were going. Osha just said, right, okay, we're going somewhere different, and then headed off. Now, what would persuade them to come back? There's a chance that they've gone, if not feral, then quite wild. Shaggy Dog is already that way. Rickon is already heading that way. Osha is a wildling, so she's used to living off the land and all the rest of it. So they won't have sort of settled down into some sort of humdrum existence, I'm pretty sure. And as I said, Rickon is probably only about 6. So Davos will be talking to Osha as much as he is talking to Rickon. And she will remember that when Maester Lewin sent them off on their way, it was his suggestion to split up the 2 Stark boys, which she agreed to. He named a couple of possible places that they could go. House Manderley and White Harbour was one of the 2. He also suggested possibly the Umbers. So she will probably remember that name. And if he says he has come from House Manderley and White Harbour, then that will add a little degree of credence to what's going on. I do wonder, we didn't see the whole exchange at the end, what Davos was given or anything like that. I do wonder whether he is going to be given some sort of token, something that he can take with him to show his good intention. So it's going to be an interesting encounter. I think out of all of the POV characters, though, probably Davos is the person you'd most want, because he's not a lord. Yes, he's been sort of raised up into the nobility, but he's not a lord by birth. He's much more comfortable living out on the sea, just mixing with normal people. So out of everybody, you probably say that he's probably one of the better people for them to be talking with, and he has got away with words. So I think it's going to be quite hard. I do wonder, there's a possibility that Wex may go along as well, who they would recognize. Now, he has more to him than we might otherwise suspect. So we don't know that Davos is necessarily on his own. We don't know that he hasn't brought with him any sort of token or anything like that. So there may be some way to kind of bridge the gap there. But it really is just going to be down to Davos's way with words. And ultimately, the thing which will draw them back is this idea that the Starks will reclaim Winterfell, because they didn't just go away, just escape it, never come back. That wasn't the plan. It was to go away with the hope that one day they would be able to return. So Osha will be looking for some sort of evidence that they will be able to return. And hopefully that's the kind of thing that Davos will be able to provide. Then we've got a question from Sam Klontz II saying, with the state of chaos we last saw Winterfell and the Manderleys in, if Davos does actually find Rickon, what do you think he does with him? Does he go back to White Harbour, take him to Stannis, to the Wall? I think I was rereading this bit, and Wyman Manderley says, bring him back about Rickon. So the implication is that Davos is being told to go up to Skagos, get Rickon, and come back to White Harbour. Now, Wyman Manderley himself has headed off up to Winterfell, but there's Robert Glover, who is there, probably still there. We haven't heard an update, but he was there last we heard, and he was trying to raise an army. Now, I suspect what will happen is that Davos will come back to White Harbour with Rickon, and then they will head up the White Knife River, which passes close by Winterfell. That's actually probably the best way for them to get there, the quickest way, rather than trying to go all the way across land, across the north from east to west, to actually get on a boat, go down to White Harbour, then try and go up the river as far as you can. I'm sure some of it's frozen, but as far as you can up on the river, and then work your way up that way. That's probably going to be a bit quicker. So I think he will go back to White Harbour. I think they'll meet up with Robert Glover, and I think that they'll head up from there. Bride of Fire says, at the end of A Dance with Dragons, we hear that Cape Wrath is about to be captured, or is already captured. Do you think we'll hear any more about Davos's family who are there? Perhaps they'll be ransomed back to Stannis. Turbo saying Robert is going feral with that hair. Yes, the hair is going... the hair has a life of its own. But Davos's family. Davos has a big family. He's got a wife. He's got 7 sons that we know of. He lost 4 of them in the Battle of the Blackwater. One of them, Devon, is a squire to Stannis. He has stayed with Melisandre up at the wall at Castle Black. The other 2, who are much younger, they are down in the Stormlands, in his lands. Now, there's a little quirk here in where Davos's lands are, because Stannis clearly was the Lord of Dragonstone, and so the areas that he could gift as lands are the areas that are under the remit of Dragonstone, which actually is not that much. But when he forgave Davos, when he ennobled him, he gave him lands. He thought that he was the Lord of Storm's End. He thought his elder brother Robert was going to be the king. He would become the Lord of Storm's End and have all of the Stormlands. So he gave him some land in the Stormlands. So Davos has got lands which were in not Stannis' part of the world. They were in the area that Renly had. And now, yes, we've got Fagon. Aegon's invasion has happened, and we've not heard specifically about whether they've taken that, but probably they have. If they've taken Storm's End, then they've probably taken most of that area. And the question is, what then? Would they be taken and used as ransom for Stannis, his wife and 2 youngest children? Possibly, but I think we have to remember that the story at the moment, the story we have for Davos, or the story the world knows about Davos, is that he's dead. The sleight of hand that happened was that Wyman Manderley, his son, was being held by the Lannisters, and in order to get his son back, he had to do something to show his loyalty to the Lannisters. And what he did was he faked Davos's death, and he said, I've killed Davos. I put his head on a spike in the ramparts and his hands, all the rest of it. And they were all dipped in tar, so you can see exactly who it was. It was all very reminiscent of Bran and Rickon, incidentally. Once you dip someone in tar, you can't tell exactly who they are. The Lannisters, or Cersei, was convinced, and Wyman Manderly's son was returned. Now, that was the point at which Wyman Manderly could then, when they were having the celebratory dinner for the return, that was when he could call Davos to him, who'd been obviously kept in seclusion since then, and say, okay, I've saved your life. Everybody thinks you're dead. Now you need to do something for me. But to the wider world, Davos is dead. So everybody's going to be working on the understanding that Davos is dead. And frankly, most people, particularly the Lannisters, they're quite mocking of Stannis, of Davos. The Onion Knight is that they think, you know, he's just this person who was a smuggler raised up above his rank to be something that he really shouldn't be. It's almost laughable. It's what most people think. So yes, they know that Stannis holds him in high regard, but they think that's folly. So are Davos's wife and children prime targets ish? They're not absolutely prime targets because Davos is dead now. It's just a matter of what Stannis would do. It's not like a member of his own family. Blue Moblin says, is Davos Azor Ahai? I think he will blossom into his true form on his journey to Skagos. His sigil will become that of a flaming, blooming onion. Well, I think if anyone is good enough and pure enough to be Azor Ahai, then I think Davos could definitely be. I love the idea of a flaming onion. I think that would be a flambéed onion, would work perfectly. But my take on all of the Azor Ahai stuff, as I'm sure everyone who watches my channel regularly knows, is we shouldn't just be looking for there being an Azor Ahai figure or a Nissa Nissa figure or anything like that. This is something which, even after the books are finished, we will still be asking or debating who it is. And it's the kind of thing that a number of different characters will each have some parts of the Azor Ahai myth that is reflective in them and their characters. And I think Davos, in his and we'll talk about Davos as Lightbringer later. I've got a couple of questions about that. But Davos, certainly in terms of his sort of purity of heart and spirit and heading to see the threat from the north and then pushing and bringing the king and Melisandre and everyone else up there, King Stannis in his eyes, up there, is playing a role of somebody who is leading the fight against the others, even though he's not. I mean, he's only ever got as far as Eastwatch, and then he came back down again. He is absolutely central to this. There's, let's see, a question from Eric Forg saying, does Davos ever see Stannis alive again? Oh, this is a good question. This is a question as much about what happens with Stannis, really. So Davos, as I said, I think in my mind, the next stage of Davos's journey is reasonably set. I think he will claim Rickon. I think that he will go down to White Harbor. I think he'll head up to Winterfell from there. And the question is whether Stannis will survive this first battle, or I don't know what we're going to call it, the Battle of Ice. I think we're often calling it, the one which is brewing between Stannis's forces and the Boltons. Is he going to survive that? My general take is he may, but he's not an end game character, Stannis. He's not. I'm pretty sure he's not going to survive the Winds of Winter. That's if he survives that first battle, I don't think he will survive a second battle. He's not going to be there right. It will just muddy the waters too much with the story of at the very end we've got Stannis as well as Jon and Dany and Vagon and all the rest of it. So I don't think he's going to survive long. Will Davos see him alive again? Maybe. But I don't think that this is going to be a huge part of the plot. I think the key is that he is not going to, and we can get into this as well later, but the key is that he's not going to see what happens with Shireen, and he has to work that out afterwards. He is going to Winterfell, not to Castle Black, which is where Shireen is and where Melisandre is. Follow-up question from Eric Fogg saying, if Davos were to actually bring Rickon back to Wyman, does Wyman honour the deal? Yes, I think he does. The Wyman is currently up at Winterfell, but he is clearly one of the people inside Winterfell who is against the Boltons, who are running things. So that is where he's at, and I think the thing about the Manderleys you have to understand is that they are very loyal to the Starks. Now, you might think that the North as a whole is generally loyal to the Starks, except possibly the Boltons or whatever. But on a grand scale, the Starks didn't start off as kings of the North, kings of winter, or anything like that. They started off as one of many petty kings all dotted around the North. And one by one, they took over the lands all the way around the North. And forced those other sort of smaller houses to kneel. And so all of these other houses, although they may be loyal to the Starks, they think of themselves as having a grand heritage that perhaps they're now slightly down on their luck compared to where they were a few millennia ago, because they had to pay homage to the Starks. The Manderleys are different. The Manderleys were a big family down south below the neck, and they lost their lands, and the Starks gave them White Harbor. So, and basically said, if you promise to serve us forever, you can have control of this. You've got to look after the what is the biggest and the only large port in the entire North, and the mouth of the main river that services the North heads all the way up to nearly Winterfell. So the Manderleys are hugely grateful to the Starks in a way that perhaps the other houses aren't. The Manderleys would have nothing if it wasn't for the Starks, and they remember that. So they, out of all of the houses in the North, have got this deep, abiding sense of a debt to be owed to the Starks that perhaps isn't there for the others. So I think this means that, added to which the Manderleys, among many others, lost people at the Red Wedding. So I think that this means that, yes, they want the Freys out, they want the Boltons out, they want the Starks back in. This is just Wyman Manderley's way of doing it, of getting a Stark back into Winterfell, because he doesn't know, or at least at the point at which he is commissioning Davos to do this mission, he does not know that the person who is apparently Arya Stark is actually not Arya Stark. He doesn't know that at all. He thinks that the way out of this is, because the Bolton claim is theoretically based on the fact that Ramsay's married to Arya Stark and all the other Starks have disappeared or died. If he produces Rickon Stark, Rickon comes before Arya in the line of succession. Therefore, because of male preference primogeniture, therefore he should be actually the Lord of Winterfell. So that is his plan, and it kind of makes sense that the North needs something, and someone, I should say, to rally around. And incidentally, actually, this is a complete digression. This probably wasn't where the question was going, but the more I think about it, the more this idea of which Stark are people rallying around is going to be quite central in the Winds of Winter, because you get Arya, who is at the moment the only Stark known to be in circulation, but it's not her. So she will eventually get found out, not immediately, because Theon's told her to keep up the act. And when she gets up to Castle Black, the person who would know it's not Arya, it's actually Jane Poole, Jon, is going to be dead. So that's going to carry on for a little while. Then we've got Rickon coming in. But if Rickon dies, as I suspect we all think that he will, who then is the Stark? There will be some people who will rally behind Jon, because there is the will. Rob wrote a will legitimizing Jon and saying that he's the rightful heir. But some people might start to think, well, what other Starks are there? And someone like Littlefinger might think to himself, okay, so Bran's gone, Jon Snow has been killed, Rickon is dead, Arya isn't actually Arya, I've got the only Stark left. And I suspect that is going to be a key part of Littlefinger's plan, bringing Sansa up to Winterfell to claim it. I think this is what he's wanting to do, is use her to claim it, because the other Starks aren't there. But by the time he gets there, I suspect we're going to have Jon installed, and with this letter, this will from Robb Stark legitimizing him. So that, I think, is how that all gets brought in. Slight digression, but it's something I've been thinking about quite a bit recently, is how this iteration of Starks and who knows that where each of the Starks are and when they come into play, that is going to be a crucial matter in driving the action of some of the main players in this. Ryan Larkin, thank you so much for the super sticker. I really appreciate that. With a little microphone. I bought myself a new microphone, guys. It's here. It's very exciting. Look at that. Loving it. That's going to be coming into action at some point later this week. So hopefully the Ryan Larkin saying love the new mic. I'm still using the old mic, I have to admit, at the moment, but this new mic is going to be in action, which hopefully will take the sound quality up another notch again. Just having a quick flick through. Sheila Hilton saying, I don't believe Rickon is going to die. I think he's going to be the Hungry Wolf 2.0 or John Ice Stark 2.0. Okay, good question. Or good point, I should probably say. Lost to party, is the North at all valuable to Littlefinger? Yes. So Littlefinger is just trying to gain as much power as he can, and he currently has the Vale under his control, and his plan will be to get the North under his control through Sansa, and then he will make a play, I suspect, for the Riverlands, because Sansa also has got Tully blood in her, and I think that will be where he sees this going, is that he can get as many different parts of the map. I don't think Littlefinger has got this hugely long-term complicated view. We all know this chaos is a ladder approach. He tries to create chaos and then grasp whatever opportunities he can. So I think that he's just got in his map, he's going to take a bit of the land and then another bit of the land and then another bit of the land until the Starks are the most powerful family in Westeros. And we saw actually on the show at the end of it all, he wouldn't be wrong in thinking that they were going to be the most powerful family in Westeros. It's just that it wasn't him who was the power behind the throne. Yes, Sansa ended up on the throne in the show, which was exactly where, in the North, which was exactly where Littlefinger wanted her to be. So I think he sees what's going on, but he doesn't actually, his plan falters at the end. Stevie Nines, thank you so much for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Jedi Spartan 42. It's not much, but here's to the well-read geek. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Holy Drogon saying the North is the largest kingdom. Yes, that's right. So it is valuable, but in terms of the politics, geopolitics within Westeros, obviously everything's at war and up in the air and all the rest of it. It's not the richest. That's the Reach, or well, Casterly Rock generally obviously is the richest, but the Reach has got the biggest army and the most lush and fertile lands. So the areas have got different strengths to them. But the North, yes, it might geographically be the biggest, but that's because things are spaced out a whole lot more. Okay, let's. Whitney Davis, thank you so much. Saying just a thank you for all your work. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Vigstable saying, Robert, glad you finally got a new mic. Do you think Davos will be around? I'm glad as well. Do you think Davos will be around prior to Jon's resurrection? Will Davos end up becoming Jon's right-hand man? Well, actually, this plays into a question. I'll answer the bit about. In fact, both parts of that. Anthony Boutsikaris over on Patreon asked a very similar question, saying, hello, Robert. Since in the books, Davos splits from Stannis at Eastwatch before ever meeting Jon at Castle Black, and we've already reached the point where Stannis left the wall. Jon is seizured by his officers, and Davos is presumably still off on Skagos. How and who do you think he will join back up in the north? And will he be joining up with Jon in the same we see something in you way? Despite not knowing him for his time as Lord Commander, will he be his de facto hand? So I think you're both asking the same question. The first point you both make is absolutely true and really important, I think. Davos has not met Jon. Davos got as far as Eastwatch and then went down. So Davos will not know what Jon is like as a person when he first encounters him, which will probably be at Winterfell. And no, he will have nothing to do with Jon's resurrection. It's I've talked about Jon's resurrection several times recently, so I won't go into the details of that. But Davos, he played a crucial role in the show, but he is not going to be there at all in the books. It's going to be other people who are involved in that one. So the second part is that how on earth would Davos end up being Jon's hand of the king, effective hand of the king, if they've not had this history? Because on the show, it kind of made a little bit of sense, is that they'd met each other, they'd had a chance to sort of suss each other out, get the measure of each other. Jon could see the value of Davos's wisdom and knowledge, and so it kind of made sense for him to pick Davos. That won't be the case at all in the books. Yes, there might be some time at Winterfell for them to get to know him. But I do wonder whether the answer to this is in trying to imagine what the situation will be when Jon takes over. So I think by this point, Stannis will be dead. I don't think that Stannis would stand for Jon declaring himself or being declared King of the North or anything like that, because he wants to be king of all 7 kingdoms, including the North. And that means that the North has the Lord of Winterfell. It doesn't have its own king. So I think Stannis will be dead by that point. Then you have to ask, well, what happens with all of Stannis's army? All of his followers? They've gone all the way up to the north. They've fought battles. They've come down. They've taken Winterfell. What then? Are they going to head back down to Dragonstone? Well, no, because that's been taken from them now. What are they going to do? They're probably, Melisandre and others are going to be believing that they should stay in the north to defend, to defend the realms of men. But how do you? Some of them are loyal. The King's men, the Queen's men are loyal to Melisandre, but the greater bulk who aren't Queen's men, how do you win them over? Well, the traditional way that kings go about doing this when you get a new king, and Jon will be a new king or a new lord, is by giving people favors, rewarding people. This is what Stannis did when he rewarded Davos all that time ago. So they put people into positions who are influential and can sort of bring people along with them. And I think it would be a notable thing for Jon to bring Davos, who was the hand of the king for Stannis, into his own inner circle. So I think that it makes absolute sense for him, not just because he's a good person who has brought Rickon and shown his goodwill and all the rest of it, and has influential people like Wyman Manderley, Robert Glover probably saying, yes, this is a good guy, we should trust him. But also, it will be a sound political move to get somebody from Team Stannis there clearly in what will then become sort of Team Jon or Team Stark. So I think it makes sense from a number of different angles, not just yes, you seem like a jolly nice chap, why don't we have you in this important position. Justin Lagowski with a really interesting question saying, do you think Davos will play a part in Jon getting Justin Massey's army from Braavos? Davos was Stannis' right-hand man. Maybe he could convince Justin Massey to lend Jon the troops. This is fascinating. So, Justin Massey is a knight serving Stannis, and Stannis sends him off with Tychonosaurus, the Iron Bank, over to Braavos to get the big loan, to hire a load of sellswords, and then to come back to Essos. And Stannis was then going to use them as part of his bid to become king. First of all, there's a timing issue here. This is going to take a while. So Justin Massey only gets sent off at the beginning of the Winds of Winter. He's got to travel in the depths of winter all the way up from the other side of Winterfell all the way up to Castle Black. Then he's got to travel all the way across east to Eastwatch. Then he's going to get on a boat, go over to Braavos. He's got to get the money. Then he's got to find the sellsword companies. That will be quite hard because a lot of them are already being hired for various things. Then he needs to get them back across to Westeros and then back across to Winterfell. Do not expect him to return within a year. So I think that army is going to take its time to arrive. Maybe if he's very quick, maybe he'll get there by the end of the Winds of Winter. Probably not until the Dream of Spring. But yeah, the question is what happens with that army now? Because Stannis thought he was being ever so clever. You know, you might hear that I'm dead. If so, Shireen, she's in charge. But Shireen's probably going to be dead by that point too. So what does Justin Massey do? Well, he's a very ambitious man. I suspect that what he would do was say, okay, well, yes, you can have this, Jon or whoever, in return for me getting X, Y, or Z. He's always trying to look, how does he move the next rung up the ladder? How does he gain some personal advantage? And yes, it would make sense for Davos, who does know him, to be the broker in that. But I don't know. I suspect that the sellsword army will just arrive in time in order to be facing the others as they invade. So they may not be as long-lived as, they might be as long-lived as the Golden Company were on the TV show. Let's put it that way. Rocky Nanty's in the chat saying, why doesn't Davos simply take Rickon to the wall. The boy will be in a neutral location under protection of the Lord Commander, who just so happens to be his half-brother. Well, yeah, that makes perfect sense, other than the fact that Stannis is... he is trying to achieve a thing... Davos is trying to achieve a thing for Stannis, which is to get the Manderleys on side. So that is his mission. He got to the Manderleys, long story in between, he got to the Manderleys and got told, yes, you can have that as long as you do this mission for me. And so what Davos is going to do is he's going to do that sub-mission, get Rickon, bring Rickon back to White Harbor. That will then get him the Manderleys' support for Stannis, which is what he was after all along. Yes, it might be in Rickon's best interest to go up to the wall based on the information that Davos had, but I don't think that he thinks that Rickon's in any danger going to White Harbor. He thinks that Rickon going to White Harbor is the first step in Rickon being made the Lord of Winterfell. So it's swings and roundabouts, but I think that Davos will want to be doing the mission that he was charged to do, and he won't divert from that unless he thinks that Rickon will be in danger, and there's no reason for him to think that he'll be in particular danger at White Harbor. Bride of Fire. So do you think Davos will come back with a host from Skagos with Rickon, Osha and Shaggy Dog, or just them? Also, what are your thoughts on the Davos is Lightbringer theory? I'll come on to the Lightbringer theory in just one moment. In terms of I can remember on a couple of previous streams having some fun speculating on the idea of one of the things that Skagos is famed for what are called unicorns, but are probably just big goats with a single horn on their foreheads. This idea that perhaps Rickon could come charging from the east with this whole army of these horned goats. I don't think that's likely. I think that, first of all, the horned goats they're not an army to be mustered. The Skagosi are not... they're deliberately staying away from, and have done for generations, staying away from Westerosi politics, so they don't want to get involved. No, this is a simple matter of trying to get Rickon and extracting him and Osha and Shaggy Dog. This is the key point that Wyman Manderley said was, don't just bring Rickon, you have to bring the direwolf, because the direwolf is the proof of who he is. That's what it's an extraction. It's not bringing an army from Skagos. Skagos don't want anything to do with this. But my thoughts on is Davos Lightbringer. Now, this is an old theory. I honestly don't know where it first came from. I think it was on Westeros.org boards. Various other people have picked up on it. The theory goes that Davos is symbolically Lightbringer, and there's a couple of passages where the language does seem to bear this up. One of them, when he's in Dragonstone, you get that big painted table, the map of Westeros, and Davos's shadow is said to be cast across the map like a sword of light, which sounds very much like Lightbringer. And there's another time, I think, when somebody says when he's about to leave and somebody says something like, don't take the light away. And he is this kind of Lightbringer thematically. He's a good guy. Where he goes, he brings light. So there's that. There's also this, when at the Battle of the Blackwater, there's this sort of mysterious thing where he has to dive into the water to escape all of the wildfire, and he kind of blacks out and then finds himself again on one of those rocks that there are in the harbor. And he had some sort of vaguely religious vision while he was there, but he doesn't really know exactly how it got out. So it's did he drown and come back? There are a few characters like that. Tyrion experienced something like that. Patchface obviously experienced something like that. If so, does that mean that he's reborn in salt and smoke? The salt of the water spoke from the wildfire? Possibly. So that's the theory. My personal take is possibly, I certainly think that George R.R. Martin is trying to create some of those illusions, create some of those images to associate with Davos. Now, he is, I suspect, not the only person to have these kind of images associated with him. I have to have some symbolism expert with me to sort of pick out all of the other characters where this has come from, but I don't think Davos is alone in that. And this fits in with what I was talking about earlier with Azor, Ahai, and Nisa. I don't think we should be looking for a character who is this thing. This is a millennia-old legend that we're going to see echoes of. We're not going to see it repeated. We're not going to see the exact same thing happen again, but we are going to get echoes of it. Is Davos going to be an echo of this sword Lightbringer, which is going to end or be used to end the war, but also to stab Nisa? Yeah, quite possibly. And I think thematically we'll be able to look back at that and say Davos was absolutely vital in his role in focusing the attention of people to the north, and therefore he is like a shard of light. Does that mean he is Lightbringer, full stop, end of discussion? No, not at all. There are many other characters and places and peoples who have similar roles. So, and similar in also the Sword Dawn, just to randomly think of one. Milk Glass is light colored. This is very much Lightbringer. Dawn, what is Dawn if not a Lightbringer? So there are many things that could sort of link across to this. I don't think that this is exactly the one answer. Paladin Pony T saying, do you think Davos is alone, or do you think he will have backup? I think he probably, for the mission to Skagos, he's probably going to be alone, but we do not know because we haven't been told. So he probably is, because the point what Wyman Manderley was saying when Davos says, hey, you've got an army, you've got boats, why don't you go in there and do it? And Manderley says, Wyman says, no, I want a smuggler. I want a secret mission to go in there and do this, everything under the radar for the moment. So that would be undermined if Davos had a large amount of support, maybe one or two people, but that's about it. Morally, Davos was there on the show when Jon Snow was resurrected. Do you see him playing any role? No, I don't. I think that he's not going to be near there. They used him because he was there, and one of the few characters who we know is indisputably good and hopeful and all the rest of it. But that's not necessarily going to be the way. There are lots of characters at the Wall at the moment at Castle Black who each have lots of competing different priorities and aims, and the show just couldn't include all of them. So they simplified it by having Davos do a lot of the work. So basically that was what was going on there. Let's go to another question from Morally saying, Davos is a fabulous character and one that many fans of A Song of Ice and Fire admire. What is it about this character that makes him a fan favorite? It's an interesting question. So he is a fan favorite, and I think part of it is probably the characterization on the TV show. Liam Cunningham did fantastic job. Some of his acting, the emoting that he did, particularly with Shireen, when you can see his love and anger all kind of boiling up in his eyes, that was absolutely brilliant. The character within the books, I think we have to love because he has a heart. He cares about people, human lives, and saving people and doing the right thing, even if it costs him. And that is something which is very praiseworthy. He rescues Edric Storm, knowing that this is probably going to cost him his life if he gets found out, but he knows that it's the right thing to do. So that's the thing that is most attractive about him, and him being this person who can always give an honest opinion to Stannis. Stannis respects that. Stannis doesn't want yes men. He wants someone who's always going to speak their mind, regardless of whether they think that Stannis will agree with it or not. And that, again, that's a very laudable attribute. It's very rare to find people who will always tell you what they think without trying to sugarcoat it or anything like that. So that is the heart of what this character is. He is a good person trying to do good things. He is not driven by ambition for himself or because he worships a particular god or anything like that. He's just trying to do the best that he can with what he is given. So that makes him a very charismatic and interesting character. So that, I think, is the essence of it. And also, I mean, something I sort of picked up on a little bit earlier, but we also have to remember that this is a story of, as a whole, of the upper classes. It doesn't always come across that way, but the people who we see are the privileged few. If you think of the point of view characters we have, the vast majority of them were brought up right in the top 1% of society. All of the Lannisters had everything that they wanted growing up. The Starks, they were the lords of the entire North. The Stark children were brought up with absolutely everything. You look around all of these characters who have, even like Theon and Asher and all the rest of it. They're right up there. They're part of the ruling families. But you get Davos as one of the few characters, particularly one of the few point of view characters, who, yes, he might have been brought up into the sort of the upper echelons of society, but he was brought up at the bottom end, at flea bottom. And I think that actually makes him a lot more accessible for us than a lot of these other characters. Is that we may love it. Like I love the character of Tyrion, but there is no doubt that he is incredibly entitled as a person. He grew up with absolutely everything that he could possibly need, except for his father's love, obviously. But that's, in terms of material possessions, he was never really wanting. You get Davos, everything he has got, he earned himself through his own actions, and again, that makes him a lot more relatable than people who are getting their riches just because they happen to be born to the right family. Daft Cody, thank you so much, saying, "Hey Robert, just dropping in to say thank you for everything you do for the community. I really enjoyed your latest video about Jaime's vision." Thank you so much. Yeah, so this is actually, thank you. I'll use that as a sort of a segue into what I normally do roughly halfway through these, which is just very briefly let you know stuff that's going on the channel. Jaime's vision, for those who don't know, Jaime had two visions in the books. They're both absolutely fascinating. I did a video about the vision his mother. I did it a few days ago, I think, which happens in the penultimate chapter that we see of him in the books so far, and it's a turning point for him. It's really underanalyzed as a a vision or a dream, it makes him ask who he is, really. And we know that he's been going sort of this sort of slowly bringing himself away from the family that he was brought up in. And this dream seems to have been the thing which tipped him over the edge. But I'll always spoil my videos in these live streams. That's why I think it's really important to actually understand what it is that's going on in that vision. But that's just the start of. It's probably going to be quite an occasional series. Every few weeks I'll do another one. A start of a series on the dreams and visions within A Song of Ice and Fire, because there are so many. So the other one that Jamie had, the next video I think I'll probably do on Jon's Azor Ahai vision, his Azor Ahai dream, which if you never come across, he has this dream where he basically is Azor Ahai. He's got the flaming sword. He's standing atop the wall fighting whites and all the rest of it. I'm going to try and break that down, see what that might be meaning. There's also all of the other ones, Dany's visions in the House of the Undying, the various Bran's Weirwood tree visions when he's sort of going back in time through all those different visions. So there's a lot of stuff out there that I want to be covering, and I'm really excited by this new series because it's given me an opportunity to really unpick the detail of some of the most mysterious dreams and visions that we've got, always with a view to not just trying to explain what the vision is about, but what is its purpose in this narrative. With the one that I was talking about a moment ago with Jamie and his mother, it's not... Yes, we can interpret it and say, this is a vision of Jamie's mother coming in and talking about da-da-da. That's fine. But the important point is, what does this do for Jamie? How does this change who he is and what path he's on? Because I think that's a really huge change that happens after he's had that. What else is coming up? Lord of the Rings videos are continuing. I'm going to be finishing. I've done two videos looking at the War of the Ring, which is like the war that was going on in the background of the Lord of the Rings. So if you've ever wondered about what actually happened in all those huge battles that we sort of see, and some of them that are equally huge that we don't see, that happen sort of off screen somewhere, this is just breaking that down. So I've got that. I'm ramping up my Lord of the Rings content over the next few weeks. So we have a couple of Lord of the Rings videos every week going forward. My Secrets of series, I've already said, but the one I did with Alicia Kingston, I was very happy with, apart from my audio, which wasn't great, but very happy with that. What was last week. Next Wednesday, I've got another fantastic, somebody new to the channel, but not new to the Song of Ice and Fire community, Bronsteris. You may know him as off of Twitter. John is a really clever guy, and he's got some fantastic thoughts about the others. So if you want to just kind of dig a bit deeper into who the others are, what symbolism that George R. R. Martin uses when he's describing them, what that might mean, what all of this might imply for the future of the story with the others, check that out next Wednesday. It's another one where my audio is a little bit dodgy, but his is perfect, and I let him talk for long periods of time, so do not let it put you off. I would highly recommend that you do have a look at that if you're at all interested in the others and what they are up to. And what else? The only other thing I would say, I think, is patrons. I always say it, but patrons, thank you so much. I can't do this without your support, quite literally. For those who don't know, Patreon, it's a fantastic way to support creators, not just myself, but many other creators use it. So if you just want to either support the channel or get access to some stuff that I produce just for my patrons, there's various benefit levels. $5, you get access to all of the audio I produce for this channel. $10, you get a thank you down in the description, and you also get a chance to vote on what this channel, what I'm going to be covering in the future. Which incidentally, that I've got a vote up now. I'm not sure whether it's finished yet. I'd have to go and have a check, but $10 plus patrons get a chance to vote on what other shows I will be covering. I'm definitely doing Lord of the Rings. I'm definitely doing A Song of Ice and Fire and the spin-off, Game of Thrones spin-off when that happens. But I'm asked out of other things like The Witcher, Wheel of Time, a few other things that sort of came up. Which of these things do you want me to be covering? So again, that's a bonus at a different level. But anyway, if you are interested in either just supporting the channel or getting access to some of those benefits, there is a link down in the description. Okay, let's have a look at some more questions from my patrons. So Henning J saying, I wonder if you share my view that Davos shares some common character features with Dunk. This is Sir Duncan the Tall. I'm not saying they are related, but both seem to rise from the depths of Flea Bottom to the highest governance ranks in Westeros. If yes, how might those common features materialize in the Winds of Winter? Yes, so I agree that they are the two main characters we know that grow from the very bottom. Flea Bottom is described as being the slum of King's Landing. This is not a good or promising place to start. Aspirations are low, but they both managed to pull themselves up and did end their stories mixing with the most important people in Westeros. So yes, there's definitely that kind of link, and both of them also the link in their characters. I've already talked about the sort of the good nature of Davos's character, which is, I suspect, George R. R. Martin created as a counterpoint to Stannis and Melisandre, who they're very forthright in their views and willingness to sacrifice, sometimes quite literally, some things in order to achieve what they think is a greater good, something that Davos would stand against. But his goodness of character is very similar, I think, to Dunk's goodness of character. The difference is that whereas Dunk has a wonderful spirit when he calls himself Dunk the Lunk, thicker than a castle wall, yes, he's being self-deprecatory, but there is a hint of truth to it, is that he doesn't always see exactly what's going on. He doesn't always compute everything that's happening around him. He's just doing the right thing. Davos does compute what's going on around him. Davos is clearly a very clever character, and he does what he can on the basis of the information that he has. So yes, there are similarities, but in terms of characters, there's also quite some difference. How is this going to play out? I don't think that the link between them is going to play out in the Winds of Winter, but I think that we are going to see that the good guys can survive and they can win, if that's the right phrase. And I think this is actually quite an important part of what George R. R. Martin is sort of trying to show us, is that this isn't going to be a happy ending where all of the heroes survive and all of the bad people die. But I think we will see some of the purer characters, being people like Davos, Brienne, Sam. I think these are the characters who are more likely to survive, in the same way that Dunk survived quite a... Yes, obviously he did die tragically at the end, but he survived quite a lot all the way through. So I think this is something George R. R. Martin finds important. Whether he will say it as such or not, I don't know. But the good characters can survive. They're not always squashed underfoot. Kofi Manqua saying, have you considered doing videos of a character journey map? You could also include where you think these characters will meet in the Winds of Winter. Yes, I mean, I have in terms of a character journey map, so mapping where the different characters go at different points in time. I've done a whole series of sort of character. A long time ago, I did a series of sort of character analyses. I've never sort of done them as sort of mapping where characters go specifically, but I think one of the things I would say when you start looking at these maps in your mind, or just, there are a couple of websites out there that do map out character journeys, you will find that a higher than you would expect proportion of them, they might go around all over the place, but they actually are in a big circle. They go back to where they started. And this is, I don't think George R. R. Martin does the specific hero's journey, but this idea that you end up back where you are, where you began, having gone through all of these challenges and having changed and adapted and grown, that definitely is part of what I think his writing style is for a lot of characters. So, for example, Sansa starts off in Winterfell with dreams of going away. She doesn't want to be in Winterfell. She thinks that she wants the courtly life and all the rest of it. She is going to end up back at Winterfell, wanting to be at Winterfell, having seen what she thought was a wonderful sort of turn sour before her. Her journey is going to be a circular one. We also get Jaime and Cersei constantly talking about, not constantly, but several times talked about, they came into the world together, they will leave it together. I think their journeys are also circular journeys, if not geographically, then certainly thematically. And even someone like Daenerys, if you mapped her character journey, it starts off at Dragonstone. She was born at Dragonstone. It will do a huge loop around, and I think that at the end of the Winds of Winter, I think it's a reasonable bet that she will set foot on Dragonstone, and that will feel like a big loop of a journey back around to where it is. So maybe one day I will actually try and map it out, put it into a video on a map, but this character loops thematically as well as geographically is definitely a thing that George R. R. Martin has been playing with, and you can map it out across a whole range of other characters as well. It's not every character, but a lot of characters do have this kind of loop to their character development, and often that's mirrored geographically. Let's just have a quick check. I think that's caught up on the chat. So Lou Kernock says, "Hi Robert, in Melisandre's chapter in A Dance with Dragons, she tells Jon and Mance, the bones help, the bones remember. The strongest glamours are built of such things: a dead man's boots, a hank of hair, a bag of finger bones. Does this hint that if Davos appears as a non-POV character at some point, we shouldn't trust that it is genuinely him? Could his body have possibly been recovered after the Battle of Blackwater Bay, his bag of finger bones stolen, and then his body dumped on that rock?" Possibly. So this is a thing. It's sort of a throwaway line from Melisandre, and I'm always wary of taking a single line and then extrapolating out from that. Yes, the bag of finger bones sounds like a thing that Davos is the only person we know, character, who carries around his finger bones in a bag. The fact that Melisandre says that, he must have been thinking of it. Does that mean that she has those finger bones? Well, it would be quite a stretch. Yeah, that they were lost, so she would have had to get them, which would have been quite hard to start with. I don't think we have seen Davos at any point in the story so far when it's not him, when it's somebody glamoured. But Might we in the future? Possibly, but you have to ask why Melisandre would want to. What's the advantage to her of having a somebody glamoured to be Stannis? At the moment, certainly not. Everybody knows he's gone away. There's no point in him being there. So it's possible, but I think that we would need to have a reason doing it. And I think we would also need to have some explanation for how she's got these finger bones. So as it stands, it's a curious phrase, and it's a curious thing that she says, but it's not. It's not really there. There's not enough there yet to pull up a full theory from, I don't think, in my view. So yeah, it's entirely possible, but we don't count on it yet. Alicia Kingston saying, can't wait to see you theorize stuff with Lady Diligence. Yeah, that's somebody definitely that I'm trying to get on my channel, who is fantastic, by the way. If you've never checked out Lady Diligence, she's got some fantastic theories about a lot of what we're talking about here, the Great Northern Conspiracy and stuff like that. So do check out that channel. Just having a quick flick through. I think that's caught up again. Andrew K saying in Deep Geek, not only for Stannis but any regime, Davos is so valuable not only as an honest voice of reason, but with his life experience, he is a great envoy to communicate and relate to all classes. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So he's a good person to have around. Is absolutely true. He has an ability that is matched up probably only by Tyrion to ingratiate himself with a wide range of people. Most other characters, frankly, annoy some people, and Tyrion annoys some people, but they both engage with huge amounts of different people and successfully. Paladin Pony T saying, do you think phantom limbs can feel magic? Because Davos and Jaime seem to feel something around magical things, and we know Star Eyes saw hellhounds at the wall. It's possible. I've not looked into it. It's certainly an idea. Certainly both Davos and Jaime, of course, lost his hand, Davos his fingers. We would call it phantom limb syndrome, but they do often sort of like reach for them, think that they feel them, notice their absence and all the rest of it. Now, does that make them more magically attuned? I don't think we've seen particular evidence of it, but then I've not really looked for it. It's an interesting idea. If I get a moment, I will have a look. Thank you for that. Maura Lee saying Davos wants Melisandre dead in the books and on the show. He doesn't approve of her influence on either Stannis or on the course of events having to do with Stannis wanting to be king. Melisandre knows this but allows Davos to live. She could easily kill or have Davos killed. Why does she allow Davos to live? Okay, so I think it's a good question. I think what we see in... Actually, let me take a step back for one moment. About 2 years ago, George R. R. Martin was asked a fantastic question. I honestly can't remember who asked it, but it was. I think it was when he was on that red carpet for a Game of Thrones premiere or something like that. And somebody asked, "Who is the most misunderstood character in all of your creation?" And his answer was Melisandre. Now, I think that there are many reasons for this. I think that there's a lot more going on with Melisandre that we don't understand, but also it's her motivations that makes her misunderstood. And we get to dig a little bit into this with the Melisandre point of view chapter that we have in A Dance with Dragons, which incidentally, complete digression, I am convinced that the reason why we suddenly have Melisandre as a POV character is that with Jon dead, who else is going to show us what's going on? George R. R. Martin creates POV characters in order to show us action in certain places. This is why we're seeing it. Davos isn't there. Sam has left. Jon's died. So who's through whose eyes are we going to see what happens in Castle Black, Melisandre's? Anyway, digression over. In that chapter, Melisandre, among other things, she thinks about Devon Seaworth, Davos's son, who was the squire of Stannis. And she thinks to herself, or she remembers when Stannis went off and Devon wanted to go with Stannis, and she said, no, you stay here with me. Stannis was going off on a very dangerous mission that people weren't sure whether he was going to come back from. Certainly, a lot of the soldiers he went with wouldn't come back from. And she recalls her reasons for saying, no, Devon stays here. And it was because she felt that Davos had suffered enough. He'd lost 4 sons already. He didn't need to lose another. And that is the empathy there, the care and compassion there that Melisandre showed. We never normally see from Melisandre. So why doesn't she want Davos killed? Because that's not what she's about. She's not about just killing random people. She will kill someone if she thinks that that is the way to achieve a greater good. But I do not believe that there is a vindictive heart within her. She is not there wanting to deliberately kill people for the sake of killing people. So when she killed Shireen on the show, it will be slightly different, but I'm sure it will still happen in the books. That's not because she likes killing children. It's because she thinks that is necessary in order to achieve the end that she wants to achieve. So she doesn't just want to kill Davos. She actually probably quite respects what he can and has done for Stannis. But also there's an extra layer here that she actually on some level cares, which is not what we normally think about with Melisandre, but that seems to be what is the case. Stephen Lovejoy saying, thank you for the super chat, by the way, saying, will Davos inevitably be Jon's Hand of the King in the books? If yes, does that inevitability mean Stannis and his cause will meet their demise? I don't think it's inevitable, but I was talking about this a little bit earlier. If Stannis does die, and I think he will die because I don't think he's an endgame character, if he doesn't die, then Jon cannot become King of the North. If he does not die, then I don't think that we're going to get the same endgame iterations that we would otherwise get between Jon and Daenerys. So I think he does have to die at some point in the Winds of Winter. I think that's pretty inevitable. I'm not going to say 100% he could survive. It's entirely possible that he could survive, but I think there's a reason why they got rid of him in the show, because he wasn't needed for the end game. Now, does this mean that it's inevitable that Davos becomes Jon's Hand of the King? Well, no. He could choose lots of people for it. But firstly, Davos has made friends. He will have made friends with Wyman Manderley, with Robert Glover, Rickon potentially even, and he's also will be respected by whichever bit of the forces of Stannis remain. And as we've talked about before, he is a good and wise person, so it makes sense. But if you were simply to write out a job description for somebody being the Hand of the King, having been the hand of a different king before, does actually, it looks good on the CV. So I think if you were to write a list of who is it that Jon could choose, Davos would certainly be right at the top of that list. Does that make it inevitable? No. It doesn't. It's Davos accompanying Jon going down to Dragonstone is not necessary. I don't think it's entirely possible he could have other characters going along there. We don't need him for his point of view because Jon will be there already, and if he meets Daenerys, we'll have Daenerys for her point of view. So it's not necessarily the case, but it would be sensible. Is where I think I'm coming at with that. Chrissy Oldstones, some of the links are still messed up. I'm sorry about that. I tried to change around the links, which are down there, to things like the merch shop. Obviously, they need to be had a look at again. I will try and do that. So apologies if you clicked on a link and it didn't work. But the ones that, if you're watching this live, the ones that my moderators are putting in the chat, I'm sure will be working. Let's go to a question from, and I've got just 2-3 more questions, I think, from my patrons. So now is a good time to be dropping some more questions in the chat. But a question from Catherine Furseth saying, "Hi Robert, hope you and Dan are enjoying the warm weather." I am, but it's a little too warm for me, partly because I've still got too much hair, and it's when I record these, I have to shut all the windows and doors as well, which is making it slightly sticky. But generally speaking, yes, I am. I'm curious as to what drives Davos, what his basic motivation is, from being a smuggler to joining and serving Stannis quite single-mindedly, since he sees Stannis as just. Is there a red thread of motives, or has Davos changed? Which I guess seems fair during his long lifetime to a degree. Okay, so in terms of his motives, we don't really know much about his motives in the first part of his life, because obviously that's before the books. But he seems to have been ambitious. The motivation for helping out Stannis originally by smuggling in those onions to save the lives of the people at Storm's End, that appears to have been motivated purely by a profit motive. That was it. He just thought, you know what, I can get something out of this. There's a huge demand for this. If I know how to smuggle these in, break through the blockade, I can do this. I will get a reward, I'm sure. So that seemed to be his pure motivation there. Since then, yes, he serves Stannis. So he does feel an obligation to serve Stannis because he recognizes what Stannis did was fair in both rewarding him and punishing him for what he'd done in the past. But and he does serve Stannis, but he does not serve him blindly. So the key example that we've got, which I've come back to a couple of times already, was with Edric Storm, who was the sort of the Gendry character in on the show, who Melisandre was basically wanting to sacrifice for Kingsblood, this being Robert Baratheon's bastard son, and Davos saves him. Now, that's because, yes, he serves Stannis, but if he just served Stannis, then he wouldn't have done that. He would have just followed orders. He tries to be good, I think, is what we can best say at the moment as his driving characteristic. I don't know whether that counts as a red thread through his character, but for characters in A Song of Ice and Fire, it is quite rare. He tries to do the right thing. Now, most of the time, the right thing for him is, given the fact that he's sworn an oath to Stannis, to be following Stannis and doing what Stannis tells him to do. So he will be doing that because he thinks it's the right thing to honor that vow. But when he thinks that he is being asked to do something wrong or immoral, that's the point at which his own personal honor code will come out, and I don't think that he views himself necessarily as a good person. I did find a quote, actually, which I should have written down here. He was talking to Melisandre, and Melisandre says, do you think you're a good person? And he sort of says, basically, I try to be, but, I guess I've got good bits and bad bits. So I don't think that he thinks of himself as a particularly good person, but he does try his best. And I think that is the sort of the driving force. And he's also, if let's call it humanitarianism, we've got lots of people who are driven by many beliefs in gods or visions or prophecies or anything like that. He seems to be driven by a belief set in humanity and the rights and wrongs of doing well by your neighbor. That seems to be where it comes from, and it is reflective of, I suspect, his upbringing, is that he came from Flea Bottom, and that's it's not just brought up in a sort of a you have to do religion, or you have to have these visions and prophecies might be about you. It's actually about day-to-day life. How do you, like normal people, how do we get on with people? How do we actually navigate being good people? And so he is trying to be a good person, and that, I guess, that's all we can ever ask for. Stephen Dillon, how will the quote from Hardhome, "dead things in the water," affect Davos as he is traveling around the northern seas? Well, that's a really, I've not thought about this. So the context here is that we know that there is a big enclave of wildlings at Hardhome. And Jon basically sends a little mission up to try and get them. Some ships go up from Eastwatch, and we get a couple of reports back from them. So whereas on the show we had what was a really good action sequence, Jon goes up to Hardhome, big battle and all the rest of it. In the books, this is all happening off screen. Jon sends up some boats. Now, one of the letters that comes back via Raven Mail talks about dead things in the water, which obviously we have to interpret as maybe this is whites of some kind. Now, some of the ships get lost on the way. This mission seems like it's not going particularly well. The question is does this affect Davos? Now, Skagos is right up at the very north. So if you were looking at a map, when you got the sort of the wall that comes across, then Skagos is around about that kind of level. Hardhome is also on that same east coast of Westeros, a little bit further up. Now, the implication is that dead things in the water are closer to Hardhome rather than Skagos, and Davos is probably going to be staying on the south when sailing from White Harbour up to Skagos. Is probably going to stop somewhere on the south coast of Skagos. So my best guess is it won't affect him, but maybe he will see something, but I don't think that this is going to be derailing what he's doing. Or perhaps we'd have got a little bit more of a hint of it beforehand. Kalnitsky in the chat saying Cotter Pike has no imagination. No, you're right. He's very, very factual. Steve C saying, I've been wondering about dead things in the water since I first read it. It's a fascinating phrase, and it's deliberately, George R. R. Martin did this deliberately, I'm sure, because it's so things. What are things? Is it like the fish are all just dead, Or is it, we see human whites swimming towards us, dead things in the water? It's not clear at all what is meant. It's just a sinister sounding thing. And it's supposed to be vague is the whole point. Okay, a couple more questions from my patrons. Johanna Hepburn saying, "Hi Robert, I think most of us agree about the Rickon Shaggy Dog plotline eventually leading nowhere. If this is true, and Rickon has no real part to play in the endgame, where do you think George R.R. Martin is going plot-wise with Davos heading to Skagos? What could he possibly bring back with him that will affect the story so much that George R.R. Martin has torn Stannis' wingman away from him at such a critical time? It seems pointless if all he does is bring Rickon back to do nothing. Is there something with in Skagos or with the Skagosi that we are missing? Also, is Skagosi the correct terminology? I believe it is. George R. R. Martin is very relaxed about how we pronounce things and the like, so I don't think that he will worry about it. In terms of the first bit, for anyone not up to speed with this working theory, that Rickon is not going to be very important. It's that the Stark, as well as obviously what happened on the TV show, but the Stark direwolf names reflect the fate of their owner in some way. Obvious example is Ghost. For John. John is going to die and then return in some way. That's what ghosts do. Summer, we kind of scratched our heads about this a little while, but Summer for Bran is because Bran's biggest role actually is probably going to be not in bringing the end of winter, but in what happens beyond that as the king of summer. So again, his fate is matched up to his direwolf's name. Shaggy Dog. A Shaggy Dog story is a long, complicated story with lots of digressions that ultimately doesn't really lead anywhere. And so that seems to imply that that's what's going to be going on with Rickon. So I do subscribe to that theory. I don't know exactly how his end is going to come. I think it probably will come in the Winds of Winter. I think Davos will probably collect him, but I think somewhere before he gets to sort of properly settle down in a calm and happy Winterfell, he will die. Now, the bulk of your question about why George R. R. Martin might send Davos all the way over to collect Rickon if Rickon is actually just like a nothing story. Well, there's a couple of elements to this, because the first bit is Rickon's symbolic role is important to the Great Northern Conspiracy. So the Mandleys need to have Rickon, and in order for them to be joining up with supporting Stannis, and the Northern Lords need to have a Stark that they can rally around in order for them to all come on side with the Starks. So even if Rickon dies quickly, he will still serve that purpose. So he has to be brought back into the narrative somehow. Someone has to bring him back in. Davos is as good a character as any. So that's part of it. And the second part of it, I think you actually, you were sort of hinting at it in your question, saying why would George R. R. Martin take Stannis's wingman away from him at such a crucial time? Because he wanted Stannis not to have that advice. Let's have a think about what Davos brings to Stannis. Stannis at the moment is sat there, and we saw it perfectly in the Theon chapter, the pre-release chapter from the Winds of Winter. Stannis is there just making all of his own executive decisions. He's not taking advice from anyone. He's just doing what he thinks is right. A lot of the time, Stannis' judgments do seem to be good, but Davos is probably the only person, Melisandre aside, that he takes advice from, even and when it is against what he believes. He doesn't change his mind when other people suggest stuff. He does what he wants to do. With Davos, he does sometimes change his mind because he sees that this is just an honest bit of advice. So why might George R. R. Martin not want Davos to be there at Stannis' side? Perhaps because Stannis is about to do something that Davos would advise him against. That is the obvious answer. So he's got his plan. Things are already going a little bit askew. His men are dying from the cold. Their horses are dying. They're having to eat their own horses to survive. This is not... Yes, there's a good chance that he might inflict quite a lot of damage. Yes, he might even win the battle, but it's not going to be easy. So, and similarly, the thought just occurred to me with Theon. Probably what's going to happen is that Stannis will take him to a local weirwood tree in order to kill him. Now, what would Davos say to that? Would he think that this is a good idea to kill Theon? Maybe he would try and persuade him against it. Maybe he would work. But I think that Theon does need to go to that weirwood tree for a variety of reasons that beyond the scope of this live stream. Anyway. Okay, one more question, which sort of ties up with a lot of other questions that we've been getting about sort of the fate of Davos. Morley says he's lost 4 out of 7 of his sons, as well as several ships. While he's a prisoner, he writes an apology letter of sorts to his wife and his remaining children. How do you see Davos's story arc ending in the books? Do you see him eventually returning to his family and retiring, or do you see him serving on the small council in King's Landing of whoever ends up the king of the 6 or 7 kingdoms? Well, I think I would love him to retire back home and enjoy a quiet life. I don't think that's actually what he would want. He is a person who wants, as we've been saying, he wants to do his best. And if he is asked to serve, then I think he would, to a new king. So I think it's entirely possible. Whether we will actually see it happen or not, I don't know. But I think it's entirely possible that he may end up being Master of Sales or something along those lines in a new king's small council. That role does seem to suit him. Who else knows those waters around King's Landing better than he does? Probably no one. So yes, I think if I had to speculate wildly, I would say that he will survive. I would say that I think that he will probably lose at least one more child, sadly. I think he's going to have a tragic story, but I think that he is going to try to do the best he can all the way through this. And at the end of all of this, he will not see that as the end of his service. I think he will see that as a chance to then move on to a new way of serving. And if that can be in King's Landing, then that makes his story another one of these that we were talking about earlier, that's a loop, a geographical loop. He was born in King's Landing. He was born in the slums in King's Landing. If his story ends up with him back at King's Landing, but back in the Red Keep as one of the most powerful people in the land, that works really well, sort of thematically as a character arc, as a story arc, plot arc, and as a character arc. I think that he is going to be thematically, at least, one of these cripples, bastards, and broken things. He is a cripple in the sense that he has lost the fingers off of one hand. He's not a bastard, so to speak, but he was born from humble birth, and we don't really know huge amounts about his parentage. And I think that he's a broken thing because he does feel bad about his family, because he does what he thinks is right, and that has had implications for his family. So I think that he will end up as the epitome of all of these things, and yet be one of those characters who inherits the world at the end of it. Bittersweet is the short version, obviously. Okay, that's all the questions I've got from my patrons. Let's just have a quick flick through the chat, see if there's any more questions in there. Eli says, to answer Johanna Hepburn's question, which was about why Davos might have been sent away from Stannis, I think Manderley sent Davos to Skagos to keep his faked execution a secret long enough to get his heir back from the Lannisters. Yeah, well, the timing of that is that he got his heir back, and it was at the party to celebrate getting his heir back that he then sent Davos off. So that's the iteration of events, is that he captured Davos, faked his death, then there was a wait whether the heir comes back. He does come back, there's a big party, everybody's celebrating, and Wyman Manderley sneaks off to talk to Davos, who he's had in seclusion in some sort of like solitary confinement effectively, and then he sends him off after that. So that's the sort of the iteration of events going on there. Adam Blake saying, just celebrated Liverpool winning the league and got me thinking, what are the sports the people of Westeros enjoy? I'm not going to comment on the league, but the Premier League. But in terms of the sports, this is something actually that George R. R. Martin has not developed as much as some other fantasy writers. Someone like Raymond D. Feist, for example, did spend quite a lot of time talking about the sports that go on. This is something George R. R. Martin hasn't done so much. I suspect this is because his story is all about the ravages of war. Effectively, the sports that we see are the upper class sports of sort of jousting and the like. What we don't see much of is what the normal folk do. Yes, they obviously do gambling and all the rest of it, and there's Sybas, which is the sort of effectively this chess sort of game, which is going around. But in terms of sports, we don't see huge amounts of that. Hopefully one day George R. R. Martin will elucidate a bit more on that. Okay, so I think that's probably about it for now. Guys, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed this. Has been a fantastic little chat. Davos is a wonderful character. I think next week I'm going to do the Hound, which is a character that is obviously someone fascinating, but also one of these cripples, bastards, and broken men that is potentially going to be inheriting the world. So that's what's coming up next time. Oh, there was just another quick super chat. So Justin Legoski saying, not much to spare right now, but thank you for this. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you very much. If you are at all interested in watching some more of these live streams, then there will be a link appearing somewhere around about here. If you are interested in my Patreon page, either supporting the channel or getting access to some stuff I do just for my patrons, then there will be a link somewhere up here. Okay, thank you very much, guys. Take care, and I will see you again soon.